Have you ever encountered a silence that feels deliberate? A silence so dense it doesn't just fill the air, it watches you. This isn't a story about superstition. It's a story about a man named Elliot and a truth that should have remained buried under fog and guilt. 3:03 a.m. Not around 3 a.m., not just past midnight. Exactly 3:03. He remembered because the clock on his dashboard had been stuck on that time for the last 15 minutes. Or maybe it only felt like that. Elliot was driving through the mountain pass, one that hadn't been on his GPS. The signal had died 20 minutes ago, and the path felt unfamiliar, even though he had taken this route once before. Only once, 3 years ago. The night Caleb died. The fog clung to the road like it was hiding something. The trees leaned in too close. The headlights barely pierced the mist, but just enough to reveal a shape on the shoulder. A man, standing unnaturally still. He wasn't dressed for the mountains. Black hoodie, black jeans, no bag, no flashlight. No hesitation. Elliot rolled down the window, his voice more automatic than intentional. "You good out here? Need a ride?" The stranger didn't blink, didn't even breathe. He simply nodded once and stepped toward the car. No urgency, no gratitude, only certainty. When he opened the door, the cabin lights flickered. Not the bulb, but something in the air. The scent shifted, metallic, like old coins and wet stone. The man got in and shut the door. Click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Elliot's knuckles tightened on the wheel. "Where you headed?" A pause. Then, in a voice so low and dry it scraped against silence, "You already know." Elliot kept his eyes on the road, but the tension tightened around him like a seatbelt in a crash. From the rearview mirror, no reflection. At first he thought it was the fog behind. Then he realized nothing was behind. No trees, no road, just black. The man beside him hadn't moved, not even to blink. Then came the second sentence. "You told him to jump." Elliot's throat constricted. The way the stranger spoke, slow, precise syllables, suggested more than memory. It suggested intimacy, like he'd been there. "You dared him," the voice continued. "Said the lake would break the fall. Said you'd do it too. But when it came time, only one of you jumped." Elliot's mind raced. He hadn't told anyone that detail, not even at the inquest. He slammed the brakes. The car screeched to a halt, and when Elliot turned, the passenger seat was empty. The fog had swallowed the road again. Elliot stepped out, heart pounding, breath fogging into the cold. There was no one around, no footsteps, no open door. Only the car, and on the inside of the passenger window, a reversed handprint, like someone pressing outward, trying to escape. His phone buzzed. One notification, a new photo, a selfie, him in the driver's seat, and behind him, in perfect focus, the hooded man, smiling. Elliot dropped the phone. V. The loop closes. When he climbed back into the car, the clock still read 3:03 a.m. But the date had changed. Exactly 3 years ago. The night Caleb disappeared, the night Elliot told the police he hadn't seen anything. The night he drove away while someone screamed his name from below the cliff's edge. Now, Elliot drives only in daylight. His mirrors are always covered with cloth. He won't tell this story to anyone in person. He sent it as a voice memo, trembling, whispered like a confession in a cathedral. And at the very end, before the audio cut off, I caught one last whisper. He said, "Next time, I drive off the cliff." So if you ever see someone by the road asking for a ride in a place no one should be walking, don't offer your seat, because some passengers don't want a lift, they want closure. Some books open doors. Some doors were never meant to exist. Emily had always been drawn to silence. Not the absence of sound, but the kind of silence that hums with things unsaid. Old libraries were her haven, the scent of yellowed parchment, the hush of carpeted footsteps, and books that whispered only when no one else listened. That rainy afternoon, she stumbled upon a library so old it seemed forgotten by time. An ivy-covered stone building, nestled where GPS failed and roads narrowed into mist. Inside, it smelled like damp ash and lavender oil, like something preserved and restrained. The librarian, a frail man with thick glasses and a voice like dried leaves, didn't greet her. He only glanced up once, then returned to cataloging by hand. No computers, no background music, just the soft thump of books breathing in dust. Emily wandered instinctively, aisle after aisle, fingers brushing titles like an archaeologist seeking bone beneath soil. Until she saw it, a narrow space in the farthest corner behind a row of decoy encyclopedias. A shelf hidden by architecture, as though the building had grown around it in defense. And there it sat, a book with no spine title, its leather cover covered in a shimmer that wasn't metallic, but biological, like insect wings under moonlight. The moment her fingers touched the cover, something inside the library clicked, subtle, almost inaudible, like an old lock disengaging. When she opened it, there were no words, only glyphs, symbols that seemed etched rather than printed. They pulsed faintly under her gaze, like they knew they were being read. The letters were inconsistent, some angular, others curved. They resembled no known language, yet her mind kept trying to assign them sound, and she made the mistake of reading them aloud. Only one line, just one. The air grew thick, and the silence fractured. A sound, too low for hearing, slid into her skull, like thought being whispered backwards. "You shouldn't have read this." The voice wasn't from the book. It wasn't even auditory. It was in the syntax of her own inner monologue, rewritten. She slammed the book shut. The whispering stopped. That night, sleep evaded her. Her dreams came in disjointed flashes, bookshelves stretching into infinity, a shadowy hand turning pages with fingers too long, a voice reciting syllables that unraveled her name. She awoke at 3:33 a.m., in her hand, a torn page from a book she didn't remember owning. It bore the same symbols. The next morning, she returned to the library, not because she wanted to, because something had planted the thought. Like a parasitic phrase stuck in her brain, the book was gone. "The book chooses," said the librarian, without looking up. Emily blinked. "Excuse me? You read it. Now it knows you." She stared. "Knows me? How?" His voice turned low, brittle. "Some pages are not written in ink. They're written in memory, and memory can be consumed." That evening, Emily's reflection blinked a moment too late. The next morning, her voice echoed an extra syllable when she said her name. The entity had entered her, subtle, precise. It didn't need possession. It used language as a vector, a linguistic virus, each symbol a command, each whisper a rewrite of her internal grammar. The final visit to the library came 3 days later. By then, Emily hadn't spoken to anyone. She didn't need to. The whispers filled the gaps. The shadows in her room rearranged themselves nightly. When she entered, the librarian was gone. The books were shaking on the shelves. The lights dimmed, not flickering but pulsing like breath. In the far corner, the book had returned. This time it opened itself, and from within the pages, the figure emerged. Not a monster, not a ghost, but a negative space in the shape of a human. A silhouette that absorbed light. Its mouth moved without sound, and yet, "You belong to the unwritten." The entity lunged, not physically, but linguistically. It rewrote her reality in a single, unspoken sentence. Emily screamed, but no sound emerged, her voice now part of the book. The next morning, the library reopened as usual. No one remembered Emily, but the book remained, back on the shelf, still untitled. And if you listen closely in the northeast wing by the hidden shelf, you'll hear the flutter of pages that don't belong to any catalogued volume. Pages that whisper in languages older than thought. Some say Emily was consumed. Others believe she became part of the book, a footnote in its curse. But one thing is certain. Some books do not tell stories. They are stories, waiting for a new reader to finish the sentence.
Fear has no beginning, and it will never end it. Every mall has its secrets. Behind the bright lights in food courts, there are hidden places, hallways, storage rooms, spaces customers never see. Most people don't know about them, but I do. And if I could go back, I wish I had never stepped into those halls. Just out of college, and despite having a degree, it was almost impossible for me to get a job day after day, week after week. I sent out my resume to every game developer and computer company in the country, and a few in Europe and Asia. 6 months into this, my money was running very low. This was when I was forced to face the facts I needed a job immediately. And it didn't matter where and for how much, just in time I found a job. Listing for a video game store at the mall. You hear about them are almost always true. Because of my background in games, I was given an interview immediately and hired soon after. My first shift was the following morning, other than a few hiccups along the way. It kept my head above water, and so I got on with Dell. 2 years later, the meat of the facts began just before my second year. It was about to start because of the high turnover. I was made an assistant manager. Took seriously since I was only a few years older than they were. I didn't care how they acted as long as they did their job around this time. A girl was hired that could have been my undoing the second I saw her. I knew she would be a problem, however, wasn't just her. That was the source of trouble. Her super jealous boyfriend became a thorn in the side of every guy that worked with her. And store and watch her work, but anytime she would get too close to a guy for his liking, he'd approach them and physically intimidate the guy she was talking to. She never said a thing when this happened. I actually think she kind of liked it, but it would be what would push her away from him in the end. She'd worked through the store for a couple of weeks before someone showed her the hallways that ran along the back every place. She took advantage of the fact he wasn't a If any person reading this doesn't know what I'm talking about, pay attention. You're about to learn something. I'm not sure how common this is, but some indoor malls, those built in the old way where each store inhabited in the area that leased from the mall owner. There are a network of paths or halls that run behind each business. They're used mainly by the employees. The system allows them to enter and leave their jobs without being seen by the customers. Often enter and leave their jobs without being seen by the customer. Pathway to maintain the spaces that being said, And all my time at that job, I only saw a member of the cleaning staff a handful of times. Most of those times they were sneaking a cigarette, rather than working. Luckily, we could still smoke inside the building back then. No one said anything to the office, so they caught you probably because they were doing the same thing on their breaks. If we were all on the same page now, I'll get to the real story. Like I said, pushing her away on her breaks, she'd often sneak out the back and disappear for a while. Where she went, I had no idea. Really cared. The boyfriend took forever to catch on. But when he did, he was super angry. She continued this routine for a few months. And just one day, she never came back to the store. I didn't attach any importance to this. It was during the holidays, and work was a nightmare. It wasn't Got a bit more interesting about 4 or 5 days later. The police showed up and had some questions about her disappearance. I was like, disappearance? What's going on here? They then informed me that she had been reported missing the day after she bailed on work by her parents. She had never made it home. And they thought we may know something. The crazy thing was that when they visited her boyfriend's place to see if she was there in addition to him, I was quick to make it clear that I didn't know anything. I had just assumed she got sick of the place and bailed. I guess they were happy with that. Never heard from them again. Time passed, and the situation around her almost faded completely from my mind until something really big in February happened and brought it back in the crystal clarity. Some workmen were renovating one of the store spaces for an incoming client, and once they had completed emptying the space of finding the source of a terrible smell. Initially, it had been inferred that the smell was emanating from some old food products left behind in the space, but even after the clearing, the stink remained. The next theory was that an animal like a rat had died in the wall. It had happened before they went to the extreme of busting holes in the wall next door to the adjoining space that was also empty and had been for some time. Displays and leftover building materials. It turned out that the mall had been using this space for years as storage, and the place was a mess. The two guys tasked with doing this were about to say forget it when one of them stumbled upon the source of the stink. And it definitely wasn't a rat. Someone had taken a large piece of plywood and put it over a tiny little closet, thus making it invisible. The guy had caught on that the smell grew worse. The wall, and as soon as he pulled back the board, he found what was causing it. The semi-mummified body of what looked like a female was lying on the floor, facing the wall. It appeared the arid and dry Arizona heat had preserved the corpse and suppressed decomposition. This had to have been why it wasn't stinking up the entire mall and managed to remain hidden for so long. Naturally, the mall was Lunch. We gone through at least 15 people in the last year ourselves. When the answer came, no one could have guessed who it was. Early one morning, I was awakened by my manager with the news that Becky Morrison was the person they found in the empty store. My only answer was who he reminded me. That she was the girl with the crazy, jealous boyfriend that had disappeared just before Christmas now. Went back to sleep when I returned. Who did it? The overall favorite was the crazy boyfriend, and everyone knew by now that he had disappeared just after her, and considering his body wasn't found alongside hers, and was a fair assumption he was most definitely nuts, it made sense. The story took a whole new angle. Just a couple of weeks after she was identified, an article was published in the paper discussing a possible new motive behind this. The police had received information that Becky had been were meeting in the unoccupied store. Her body had been discovered in and fooling around. After following some leads, they were able to identify the employee. He was a 22-year-old guy working in the Hallmark store. No name was given. He told the officers that he and Becky were supposed to hook up the day she disappeared, but he got holed up by the time he had reached the empty space, and she was gone. He figured she couldn't wait and return to work. It was only a few days. Was missing. His mind went straight to the worst, and he was afraid he'd be blamed for it. So he said nothing. Then, when the news reached him that the boyfriend was also missing, it was too late. He figured if the boyfriend was hiding out waiting for this chance to get him, it was best for him to say nothing. just on the off chance he didn't know for sure who the guy was. It all boiled down to him being afraid, and with what I knew I could understand. Short while too. It wasn't long, but once is all it takes. That was the person who told her about the back hallways. After all, we slipped out there a few times to mess around. Fortunately, we never got busted when she moved on to the next guy. I wasn't hurt. I knew she had a boyfriend anyway now. You know why I had to act as if though I didn't care about her? We figured it was the safest thing. For the botus turns out we're righty was overjoyed cheating, which seemed to be the reason he would no doubt come after the dude she was with. I felt sorry for the Hallmark guy. It wouldn't take much mental math to figure out who he was if he didn't already know. And since they still haven't found him to this day, the fear of her boyfriend popping up out of nowhere and putting some holes in him must have been real strong. I know I was looking over my shoulder for several years after. The police have a story. Activity on his bank account or card for years, and I still wasn't taking any chances. 9 years later, a week doesn't go by that I don't think about her. An outsider may have seen her as an easy girl, but I still don't think of her that way. It struck me that she was just looking for a guy that would treat her well and commit to her for the long term without being psychotic about it.